Hello and welcome to Parenting Stuff I Wish I Knew Sooner and Want You to Know Now. I'm your host, Erica Desper, founder of the Center for Confident Parenting and a mom who seemed to learn everything, still needs to learn everything I needed to know the hard way. I am joined today by Tara Trievel, owner and social learning specialist at To Be Social. She's also host of the Parenting Powerhouse Podcast for moms who need strategies and stress reduction while raising neurodivergent kids, teens, and adults, and co-host of Conversations with Kevin, a podcast that explores life's ups and downs from the perspective of a now adult with autism. Tara, welcome. Thank you so much for making the time to join me.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, Erica.
I'm very excited. We're treating ourselves as podcast guests. And it's been
fun.
Awesome. So first, tell us a little bit about your background, your family, and how you came to offer this type of support.
So that is a very loaded question.
It is.
And hopefully I can answer it in just, a couple minutes here. So I guess first I have to say, looking at my family, my background, I can just give you the basics, which I'm going to do that. But I just want to let you know that it's always evolving and I'm always figuring out a little bit more how my past, how my life is basically determining where I am today. And it's pretty amazing. So I'm going to give you just the basic background.
Sure.
But I actually went to college for elementary education only because I had a daughter very early on. And while I was in college, I actually started in psychology and I got pregnant in college. And so I was like, oh my gosh, you know what I'm going to do? I've got this young girl and I don't know what to do with her, basically, because I was kind of young myself. I was 21. And so I went back to school and took elementary ed courses and switched my major just to help me with parenting. Mm-hmm. And in that journey, I was loving education and just child development and putting a little bit of that psychology in there. And that's kind of where I started in my educational career.
That's a really cool start.
Yeah, it was actually kind of neat. And
I was already teaching you things.
And that's the thing. That's what I've learned is that everybody around me has pushed me to find out who I am and where I am today and keep on going. So I never really intended to be a teacher, like a public school teacher, but my sister was teaching. So she was in a private school that needed a long-term sub. So I went ahead and applied and got this position as a long-term sub. And within a month or two, they offered me the position. And I was like, okay, why not? I'm young, why not? So I got into this position and it was a small private school for kids with ADHD and Asperger's. And I was a gen ed teacher coming into this. So I didn't really know anything. And it was a lot of fun figuring this out, but it was a struggle. So I had to quickly learn how to teach kids on the spectrum with Asperger's, diagnosed with Asperger's and ADHD, because the classroom, as you can imagine, was crazy. And I tried everything, every like cookie cutter program out there. Nothing was working to help these kids just, be friendly or whatever. And so I finally found Michelle Garcia Winner, Social Thinking. And this was the aha moment. I brought it back to the classroom. It was working. So I started tutoring outside of school and actually was able to reach a huge audience, young kids all the way through adulthood. And that's kind of where I started with To Be Social is, I just decided this is where I want to be. So I was not teaching in the classroom anymore. I just made it a full-time job and was able to reach many more people. Now, in the meantime, my daughter did go to this school and she had some learning differences. And then actually, as she became a teenager, it was kind of difficult. She ran into a lot of mental health type of diagnoses, through her teenage years. I didn't really know anything different. I didn't, even though I knew ADHD and autism, it was still kind of new to me. And I just went along with what the doctors basically said the psychiatrist. So here it looks like now she's 30. And she feels that maybe some of that wasn't true. Maybe she's more spectrumy or ADHD, which makes sense.
Sure.
And she has a son that lives with me now. So he is diagnosed on the spectrum, like the ASCII type on the spectrum. So
Life
I
wanted
get
to
to,
test your expertise, right? You were given to each
yeah,
other. Exciting.
frustrating, or maybe I call it like it's fun and exciting, every day. So that's kind of what's got me to where I am now.
That is really, really awesome. So you've both parented and now grandparented, I guess, two people through the teen years and into adulthood. That's a really, really cool perspective. And maybe I missed if you mentioned this, but you also have ADHD yourself.
Yeah, I didn't mention that, did I?
No.
Well, why would I? Because the ADHD just totally came out in that.
I know. It's my job to help you stay on track. Glad I caught you early in the morning.
Yes, I was diagnosed with ADHD in my 40s. And so, as an adult, I always knew there was something going on. I knew I was amazing in some areas, and could just like keep up with everything. And I had tons of energy and everything. But, I also thought in other ways, oh my gosh, my brain is totally screwed up. What's going on here? Maybe I'm just under too much pressure. So, yeah, but I'm unmedicated. So that makes it difficult for me because that's a challenge to regulate myself.
For sure. And I know from operating in the circles that I operate in, I know that ADHD is very often overlooked in females, and a lot of women are discovering for themselves at an older age that it was overlooked, and that's why certain things have always been a struggle for them. So if you're listening and you're like, wait a minute, maybe go check it out because it gives you a lot of insight into your strengths and your challenges. And can you, before we move on to my list of questions, I'm going to throw one at you I didn't prep you for. What does the support you offer, what does that actually look like for kids and young adults in terms of the format?
The format. So the format is basically online. And what I do is I take a look at where the person is today in relation to their perspective taking skills. So how do they see the world? How do they understand the world around them and their own self-awareness level? And when we do that, of course, we're online. It's a Zoom lesson, and it is therapeutic in nature. But what I like to do is I like to use video clips, like comedic video clips, because as we're learning these concepts and how to take perspective better and how to, use social communication differently to make our lives a lot easier and in control and organized, I like to go outside of ourselves, because if we make it too personal, it seems to not work out as well, because then we're feeling like there's something wrong with us and we're concentrating on that and it's causing anxiety. So I use clips from Friends or Big Bang Theory and stuff like that to analyze and read other people and situations, and then bring in the concepts that way and apply them. And then actually what my program does, it's built to be as organic as possible. So there is no way you can actually practice these things. It's automatically happening on a daily basis when we're around other people and sharing space with other people. So it just kind of organically happens. And I don't know when and where, and that's going to happen, but
that's awesome. And you have a group in person.
I do. I do have groups in person, and now that I'm sharing this awesome space with you and some awesome professionals, so once a month I try to have groups for especially the teenagers, middle schoolers and high schoolers, and these groups are matched by cognitive ability and really where they are in their personality and this perspective taking skill arena. And what we do is I try to make it not like, oh, it's a lesson or, we're learning. I want these guys to feel like they're not really learning, they're having fun. So it's a little bit more authentic, a little bit more novice when I can. So we play
Takes the
games.
pressure off, maybe.
It does. And they just need to learn that relationships are built in a way where we are just kind of trusting each other over time, and we can't force it. So we just kind of have a good time, and I try to lower the anxiety the most I can. And that's
awesome. And I've seen you take your groups on field trips.
Oh,
which
yes.
looks super fun.
Field trips, that's the best part. So
Wonderful.
yeah, actually I was never going to do that before the kids were like, oh, let's go eat somewhere. Let's do this. And this was early on in this business. And I was like, oh, can I do that? That's a lot to do. But we did it a couple of times and they loved it. And honestly, this is so sad, but I found out through these field trips that a lot of these kids have never gone to like Applebee's with their friends. It was only with a family. They had never done some of these things, even gone to the movies with a friend. It was always family or whatever. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, okay, I have to do this. So then I just continued to offer those field trips.
I love that so much. So now that we know what that looks like, why is that needed? What is it about being neurodivergent, whether it's ADHD, autism, that makes it so hard or can make it so hard for adolescents, young adults to establish friendships, to fit in with their peers, to engage in conversation?
So again, I'm going to go back to that perspective taking. That is what I found is the culprit, the lack of those skills. And
can you just define that for someone who doesn't know what that means?
Yeah, definitely. So when you're looking at a child, developmental age between 2 to 6 years, actually not developmental age, actual age, between 2 to 6 years, we are learning how to read somebody else's mind, basically. When we point to something, we are thinking the other person is, following along with that. They're thinking about what we're pointing at, and we are able to read that in the other person. Our kids with ADHD and ASD are kind of missing that. It's not intuitive for them. So they are really living in a very natural neurology, but there's so much going on. So, okay, between 2 and 6 years old, that's when this develops. So when they're older, that has never developed and they don't know it. And it's just really taking a look at, okay, taking somebody else's perspective, thinking about their thoughts. They have different thoughts than mine, but what does that really mean in relation to me? How are they perceiving me? What am I projecting that is causing them to perceive me in a certain way? And that's really what I kind of hone in on. And along those lines, comes a lot. So we do get a little bit more self-awareness with that, because if we're able to accurately read how somebody else is thinking or feeling about us according to their own perspective, then we know a little bit more about ourselves. And what I find with all of my students, every single one of them, they really see the world from their own perspective. So they think that other people are thinking about them, what they're thinking about themselves. And that is so not true. Most of the time, it's not even close. And I tell my kids this, and this is a great tip, that nobody is living in your head. Nobody else is living in your head. They don't know you as well as you know yourself. So they can't possibly be thinking what you're thinking about yourself. And an example would be in a classroom, whatever.
There's always one.
And that's really, really powerful. So did I answer the question? Because now I'm thinking.
No, you did. And it's actually a good segue into another question. So you mentioned that neurodivergent kids and young adults can struggle with perspective taking. I know that empathy is another one. What's the list of things that you see be the top struggles?
Well, the empathy thing, that's huge, because over the years, I know that, the paradigm is shifting. We're understanding autism a bit more. But I know in the past, and it still happens today, where that word empathy comes up. And people feel that these kids with ASD are not empathetic enough. Why? Because we see them maybe shut down. They are not very emotional when it comes to maybe a death in the family or something like that. And to be honest with you, in my experience, I mean, I've been teaching them for 20 years, these guys, and I find that they are overly empathetic, that their feelings are so strong, so intense that they shy away from it and they shut down because it's too much. It's way, way too much. So they are actually overly empathetic for the most part. So taking that example, if there's a death in the family, well, of course, there's so many feelings coming in and not being able to executively figure out what that is and still being in that fight, flight, or freeze mode as their brain is still developing. It's like the only thing to do is kind of shy away from it. That's really difficult. And I think that that is their strategy. And with everything, and if we think about it that way, that everything is just so much more intense. So if we're feeling something, then our kid is probably feeling that same thing, having that feeling 10 to 20 times stronger.
So in a friendship setting then, so the original question was, how does this make friendships challenging? I mean, we can easily infer what that would lead to. But I'm assuming it would be like, a friend is complaining about what happened to them or whatever, and the person they're telling it to seems indifferent or to not care, but they're kind of just protecting themselves. Maybe there's too much input. They're feeling overly empathetic. They may make the neurodivergent person may make a lot of assumptions within that conversation of they're mad at me or they don't trust me or whatever they're thinking, but they're just in their own head and they're misreading the situation.
You're exactly right. And then it also goes the other way where they may get very into a friendship. They think that if somebody is talking to them or paying attention to them, that person is their best friend. And they really have very strong, caring feelings for this person. And I find that a lot. So when kids are very much younger, in elementary school, that's okay. That happens. You just kind of play together and whatever. But by middle school and high school, it's becoming a little bit more complex and people kind of freaks them out a little bit more.
Particularly if they themselves are neurotypical and they can't explain this to themselves, don't recognize it, can't relate to it.
You're right, especially. And that's what makes it really difficult for the ND kids with the NT kids, and that's why, I mean, to be honest with you, so many people over the years have said, I just want my kid to be around NT kids so that they can learn to be like, and honestly, I've talked to so many of my students and it's very, very uncomfortable because of this exact reason. The neurotypical kids do not tolerate nearly as much as the ND kids.
Yeah. Awesome. To go back to the perspective taking for a second, can you give us an example? You can make up a fictional student or one that you've worked with and not share their details of a situation where they were having a struggle because of the lack of perspective taking. And then how would you sort of shift that for them? Right? Take a moment.
If a neurodivergent kid has a sibling that is NT or not diagnosed, I find more difficulty. And the difficulty really, really stems from the difference in ages. So if I have one of my students that I'm working with is, say, 12 years old, and they have a sibling that's 8 or 9, there is some serious fighting going on in the house and just disruption and tension and friction all the time because of perspective. And I'll tell you why. The 12-year-old is treating the 9-year-old like a 12-year-old or, on their level, maybe not 12 years old, but more on their level, is not able
because that's all they know in their own head.
Yes, that's all they know. And so a 9-year-old is going to be following them around, doing stuff that maybe they did when they were 9, but they cannot put themselves in that place. It's just where they are. And they expect the 9-year-old to be exactly like them. And that's really, really difficult. And that might happen, in other households as well. But this is a very, very bold line with the neurodivergent and neurotypical
Mhm.
kids in the family. So that's something to really focus on, is trying to get them to remember, well, what were you like when you were 9? This is very different than what you're thinking. And that's just one
That's a great
example.
example. So I think what I hear you saying is what is implicit for many of us as neurotypical. And by the way, if you heard the abbreviation NT, that's what we mean,
I'm
neurotypical.
sorry. Yes.
Just, I don't know who of us know all the lingo and who of us don't. What is implicit for some of us, I might say to myself, like, oh, well, that person's behaving that way because they're a lot younger. And that's how you behave at that age. But a neurodivergent person may need that sort of, they may need to be talked through that explicitly, like questioning and kind of using logic to like help put themselves in shoes that are not theirs.
Mhm. Yeah. And so if we take a look at this in a lot of different examples, even kids who, some of our neurodivergent kids are super, super intelligent, and they
Sure.
have a really hard time being like goofy or immature, especially when they're in
Mm,
middle school, with other middle schoolers, their peers. So what happens is they will sometimes tell on them in class, or they will call out, this behavior, or correct them.
mhm,
And that's because the lack of perspective taking skills is not allowing them to see that, this isn't okay. This is making somebody feel really crappy or really bad, or,
mhm,
um, you know, that's really what we're doing, is we are really kind of affecting somebody's feelings first. So
mm,
that's what I kind of focus on.
yeah,
So in that case, they may not be finding peers or people they like to hang out with, because these kids, these boys in my class are all talking about farting, and they think it's so funny, and they're just laughing and stuff. And there's nothing funny about that. That's just stupid. It's like, that's the kind of thing we might hear. And it's because they're not able to take the perspective that, hey, this is just like a teenage boy thing, and this is
right,
goofy, and I don't have to be a part of it, but I don't need to tell them it's stupid either. You know?
right, right, right. Awesome. So on the topic of feelings, why is it so hard for kids and young adults that are neurodivergent to regulate their emotions? I mean, bottom line, it's hard for all of us to regulate our emotions, but this is an extra struggle. What's the connection there?
Yeah. And like you said, all of us struggle, because feelings are feelings, right? So we cannot control our feelings. They happen so rapidly and so often in every situation. So everything's causing a feeling. Everything we see, everything we hear, everything we're experiencing is causing a feeling. So that
And
feeling
they're
is,
feeling it 10 to 20 times more.
yeah, yes, yes, and they're feeling it 10 to 20 times stronger. So that's going to be a lot harder to react to or to rationalize, because feelings just aren't rational anyway, right? And unless we have the
Right.
time to take. Um, so yeah, the feelings come in, they are going to be overwhelming. And so what we need to look at is the reaction to the feeling. And the reaction to the feeling we can usually control if we're able to rationalize it. So maturity, like you said, when we get older, really maturity is going to be the natural way to deal with it. But our guys are going to be possibly 5 to 10 years behind normally developing brain. I don't know what you want to call it. Like,
Hmm.
even neurotypical is tough, because to me, neurodivergent is like neurodiversity. We are all diverse, right?
Sure.
And every one of our brains is different. So that's why I keep going back and forth between NT and D. It's tough.
Yeah.
So as we get older, no matter what type of brain we have, maturity is going to help. Some kids, it's going to take 5 to 10 years, probably longer.
Mm.
But those feelings are the thing that happens first, no matter what. And what we want to concentrate on is, how are we reacting to those feelings? And what size is the problem? Not to us, because it's always going to be big to us.
Mm.
Whatever happens to us just feels big, especially when we're younger. But the perspective taking part of this and self-awareness is, how is this problem being perceived, generally speaking, by anybody,
Okay.
by anybody else? That's how we really gauge the size of the problem, because that's how other people are seeing it. That's how other people are going to react to us. And that helps us with the self-awareness. Does that
Awesome.
kind of,
Yes,
yeah.
that's really great. So I want to shift a little bit. We've so far talked about the kids, the young adults. This not only does this sound tiring and full of effort and time consuming, but I know from personal experience that those aren't just feelings, those are true. So it goes to figure that on the mom, the parent, the caregiver side, and obviously this podcast is not just for moms or people who identify as moms, but I mean everyone when I say that. But as the parent of a neurodivergent kid, um, I know that the struggle with respect to burnout and overwhelm is all too real, and that's me as a, I have a typical brain, right? But I know that there's the extra challenge. A lot of the parents in my circle are neurodivergent themselves, so they are struggling with all of these things, and now their job is to help a younger, immature person who's struggling with similar things. So if your kid's disorganized and they need help with that, and you're disorganized, I mean, that's a huge, sometimes feels like insurmountable challenge, but really for all of us, no matter what our strengths are, this is a challenge. So can you speak to a bit about what you're seeing in regard to mom or parent caregiver overwhelm and burnout? How common is it? What is it doing to us?
Yeah. And, part of my lessons, and this is such a powerful part, is actually the wrap up at the end, that 5 or 10 minutes when I wrap up with the parents to help teach them what I'm teaching their kids. So it has been powerful because it does help the parent shift in their thinking and in their ability to, help their kid out in the moment. Now, for themselves, that's a different story, but it's very necessary as well. So what I found is that the parents need just as much as the kids, but maybe in a little bit of a different way. So that perspective, they already have it, for the most part, but they just haven't had their eyes open to it.
Mm-hmm.
So helping the parent think like a kid again is really, really important. Really try to put yourself in the kid's shoes. That's one part of this, but you can't really do that until you take care of yourself first. And that's what I find with the parent burnout, is how to get them to the table in the first place.
Yeah.
Because we don't always have to take care of a problem right then and there. That's sometimes the worst time to do it, because we're not ready. We haven't gotten ourselves prepared, and our kid definitely isn't prepared. So then we cause sometimes more friction. Unless it's a dangerous situation, we don't have to step in. We need to definitely take the time to step away and, realize what's going on, put ourselves in our kid's place for a minute, let go of our ego, because we do know a lot. We have learned a lot. We know our kids so well, but our ego is telling us we know what to do, or we maybe are assuming that we know what they're upset about.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of taking a step back first before even getting into that situation.
Yeah. And you mentioned taking care of yourself, and that's one way we can do that, is to step back and give ourselves a minute. I don't even like to use the word self-care because that's such a buzz word, and some of us think it means, getting our nails done or whatever, and that's not our thing, and we don't have the time. What are like some tangible, how are we caring for ourselves when so much effort and energy is directed towards our kids?
One thing, all we have to do, honestly, and you might think, oh my gosh, this is the weirdest thing I've heard, or maybe you've heard it before. We need to love ourselves. We need to be happy and secure and confident in our own skin. And you know what? That doesn't take learning anything new. It's already here. It's already within us. We have just been programmed to kind of think differently and to listen to other people and to completely and utterly compare ourselves to other situations and other people. So it's really being confident in ourselves and just loving ourselves. And honestly, I'll give you one of my tips. What helps
Yes,
is
it's my next question.
one of the things that I do every day, and I wake up and I tell myself I am who I am, and that is enough. And I tell myself I love myself and I love my life. And you know what? Even if I don't believe it, even if I don't agree with myself, I just say it, and that just kind of shifts me just enough to do the next thing. Now, of course, when something really comes up and I'm frustrated, and I'm tired and I'm cranky and everything else, then it's hard to do that. But if we can tell ourselves, today is fantastic, I am well, whatever it is, it just shifts for that second to try to rationalize the situation. So even if it's only that, just a step away, just a couple of
And do
things.
you think that's different from, I hear a lot lately about toxic positivity. Do you think that's different? It's more just help shift your mindset by telling yourself the thing you want to be true. You're not telling yourself, everything's beautiful all the time.
Why not? Why not? To be honest with you, there's nothing wrong with being positive. What I've found is when I get caught and I'm stuck in that negative thinking, like, oh my gosh, I just can't take this today. I can't.
Right.
I honestly can't.
Because you just told yourself you couldn't.
Yeah. And I kind of like, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, this can't happen all the time. Of course, this isn't the end all, the cure all, but it is something that has really helped me. And I didn't figure this out until just the last couple of years, really, when things just got so overwhelming. And I felt like I was in this like never ending spiral of, every day I just felt so overwhelmed and burnt out and so much was going on, that it was like, I started kind of joking with myself. I thought I was, like, you're wonderful. You're great. And I'm like, and it would just kind of make me laugh and that was the positivity that I needed to begin with. Now it's like almost like habit, and I do it. And to be honest with you, it just shifts my mindset just enough for 5 minutes or whatever. And then, then we have that self-care you were talking about that I used to feel guilty about, jumping on Amazon when I was really stressed and buy something. Well, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that, because you know what that did for me? That gave me maybe 20 or 30 minutes of feeling great, because I can't wait until this thing comes in. It could be.
Right.
So I was great for everybody else in my family because I felt good for that half hour. So I don't know. It's, to each his own, but
exactly. I mean, the whole point of self-care is to feel better than when you started, to feel a little refreshed, renewed, restored. So if that's scrolling and shopping for you, go for it. Whereas for someone else, maybe it is getting their nails done or taking a walk outside or sitting in silence and drinking a beverage while it's still hot. Those things don't have to take more than a few minutes. Maybe it's lock yourself in the bathroom.
Yeah,
but it's for you, and you carve it out where and when you can. And just make sure you're feeling better than when it started. So to the parent or caregiver who's listening, feeling all of that and looking for strategies, so far we have like to take a moment. You don't have to dive in, solve the problem, address the issue immediately. You can pause first for yourself, take a moment for yourself, step back, try to get into your child's shoes. Love yourself, positive affirmations. You didn't mention this, but I know from following you and being friends with you that you also have something that you are into that is not at all about your profession, your children. It's for you. It's mountain biking. It's outdoors. It's moving your body. Can you, on a personal note, share what does that do for you to be able to kind of put all of this aside sometimes and just do that?
That is my therapy. And as far as being out in nature, I love it anyway, because it's just something I can maybe relate to or connect to, on like a more of a spiritual level. Mm-hmm. So I love being in nature, but the mountain biking is a little bit different. So I could be out hiking and I could have a good time, but you know what? Some of those, frustrating thoughts or, I can get stuck even doing that, even if I'm with my dog and stuff like that. But mountain biking, I cannot, because it's so dangerous that I can only concentrate on survival when I'm out there on the bike riding around. So that is therapy. So the mountain
There's
biking,
no room for all the other thoughts.
No, because if I do think about something else, I could get in trouble out there. So So it's, yes, very much when I have the time, I get on that bike and I go out there, and it does help me a lot. So I think everybody has their thing, but it's so difficult finding the time for that.
Mhm.
That's why I just affirm for myself that, hey, you know what? I'm okay.
Right. I love that. I love that so much. All right. I don't want to let you go, but we're coming to the end. So let's take, we kind of already headed this direction, but to formalize it, take off your learning specialist hat, your teacher hat, your coach hat, put only your mom, or if you prefer, grandmom hat back on. What is one thing that you've learned on your own parenting journey that you wish you had come to or known or been told sooner, and you want our listeners to know now? Hopefully something we haven't touched on yet, or if you just want to re-emphasize something we did touch on, what would that one thing be? Or maybe it's more than one thing.
Oh, that's a toughie. It really is. But the one thing that just popped into my mind is there is no guidebook. I am every day is a new day, and even something that worked yesterday may not work today. So it's almost like, you know, don't give up. Don't be hard on myself, because I'm going to get through it. I'm going to learn. I'm going to do something. It may not be what I feel is perfect in the moment, but it may work out for my kiddo. So that's what I would say is live in the moment. Take
Mm,
every minute, every day, one day at a time. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't compare. Don't try to raise your expectations or have expectations. Maybe that's one thing is,
mhm,
just get rid of the expectations. You don't have to lower them or raise them, but get rid of them and try to take things, one step at a time. I think it makes it more powerful, and I think it makes us stronger to be able to look at things maybe more positively, but just tackle them. And I'm very visual. So the one thing that came to my mind a while ago, I think I put it on a podcast or somewhere, is when I was sitting on the beach and I was watching the waves roll in. And I thought,
mhm,
this is just, powerful and tremendous and beautiful. And then I thought, you know what? Every day is like tons of waves coming at me every day.
right.
And what am I going to do with them? They're either going to crash on me, or I can ride them, because they're all
Mm,
going to crash anyway. Everything comes down and
for real.
crashes, and especially with our kids, it's like, my gosh, you have a big blow up, and there's going to be a crash. It's going to.
Mhm,
But do we let it crash on us, or do we have some fun with it and ride the wave? And how do we do that? Make it fun. Take the experience for what it is. It's an
mhm,
experience. It's their experience. It's not necessarily my experience. It's their
mhm.
experience, and I'm helping them with it. Does that make sense?
It does. I love it. I love it so much. And I love what you do. And thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for making the time. We could talk forever about so many things. So I think we'll wrap it up here. And I would love to have you back to share more information. Um, Thank you so much for joining me. Listeners, parents, caregivers, I'll be back soon with more stuff that I and others wish that we knew sooner. In the meantime, I will leave you with my list of the stuff I learned the hardest way, which a little bit applies to what we're talking about today. Number one, accept help when it is offered. Two, ask for it when it is not. Three, you are the expert on your child. Always,
Yes.
always, always trust your gut. And if you need to be, number four, be the squeaky wheel. Thank you so much, everybody.